The snow fell like tiny blades that night, slicing through skin and bone, each flaking a cold reminder that winter did not care who you were or what you were running from. Brandon Ashford's laughter echoed across the abandoned industrial lot as he shoved Isabella backward, her phone skidding across the frozen ground into the darkness. "What's wrong, princess? Daddy's little mafia brat can't fight back." His breath formed clouds in the freezing air as he cornered her against his black BMW, his eyes glazed with alcohol and wounded pride. "Brandon, please, the storm is getting worse." Isabella's voice trembled, not from fear but from the cold, seeping through her torn school uniform, the buttons ripped open when she had tried to escape his grip. "You should have thought about that before you humiliated me in front of everyone." With one violent shove, he threw her into the snow and climbed back into his car. "Good luck getting home, you stuck-up bitch." The BMW roared away, tires spitting slush and gravel, leaving Isabella alone in the abandoned factory district, 10 miles from anywhere, in -20-degree weather. She was still lying there, arms wrapped around herself, blood freezing on her split lip, when a shadow emerged through the whiteout. "Are you okay?" Isabella looked up and saw a woman she had never seen before, thin, almost fragile, wearing a faded navy coat that had clearly seen better decades. The woman's cheekbones were too sharp, her eyes too hollow, the kind of face that spoke of years of hunger and loneliness. "I'm fine," Isabella lied through chattering teeth. "Just waiting for. You're turning blue and your lips are bleeding." The woman did not hesitate. Her hands moved to her coat buttons. "What are you doing?" She pulled off the only coat she owned, the last thing her mother had given her before cancer stole her away 13 years ago, and draped it over Isabella's shoulders. The fabric still held her body heat, smelled faintly of lavender and survival. "No, I can't take this. You'll freeze to death." Isabella tried to push it back, but the woman had already stepped away, her thin sweater already soaked through, revealing the scars on her wrists that told stories Isabella could not begin to imagine. "I live close by." "You don't." The lie came easy. She did not tell this shivering girl about the abandoned factory basement 5 miles away from where she had been squatting for 8 months. "Did you not mention that this coat was the only barrier between maybe surviving the walk home and certainly not making it? Did not explain that she had 3 jobs, a dying sister in foster care, and exactly $12 to her name?" "Wait, at least tell me your name," Isabella called after her. But the woman had already disappeared into the storm, a ghost who had learned long ago that being invisible was the only way to survive. Walking toward what she did not know would be her final steps in the cold. What she did not know was that the shivering girl she had just saved was the only daughter of Vincent Moretti, the most powerful and ruthless mafia boss in Chicago, a man who had destroyed entire families for lesser offenses than leaving his daughter to die. And when Vincent Moretti discovered what had happened that night, 2 things would follow: a punishment so brutal that Brandon Ashford would never speak of it again, and a reward so life-changing that Nora Hayes would finally learn what it meant to be seen, to be protected, to be loved by a monster who would burn the world down for those he claimed as his own. If this story gives you chills, smash that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss what happens next, because trust me, Vincent Moretti's revenge is just getting started. 1 coat, 2 broken souls, and a love that even the coldest winter couldn't freeze. At the same time, on the penthouse floor of the Moretti Tower, Vincent Moretti was sitting at the head of the table in a private meeting room where only the most powerful figures of the underworld were ever allowed to set foot. 4 neighboring crime bosses sat around him, cigar smoke drifting lazily through the air, their low voices murmuring about territory, about money, about agreements written in blood. Vincent listened more than he spoke. That was his way, because those who talked too much were usually the ones who died early. He wore a black 3-piece suit, a Patek Philippe watch glinting on his wrist, his dark hair slicked neatly back, and his steel gray eyes never revealing anything at all. At the age of 36, Vincent Moretti had built an empire his father had spent an entire lifetime trying to create, and he had done it through calculated ruthlessness, through cold intelligence, and through a single rule: never let an enemy see your weakness. But Vincent had one weakness, a single weakness that the entire underworld knew and yet no one dared to touch: Isabella, his daughter. The phone in Vincent's pocket vibrated. He glanced at the screen and saw Marco's name, his right hand, the man who had followed him for 20 years. Marco never called during a meeting unless something was wrong. Vincent raised the phone to his ear and said nothing. He only listened. Marco's voice on the other end held just 2 words: Isabella, hospital. The world stopped. The room suddenly became so silent it was suffocating. Or perhaps Vincent no longer heard anything except the sound of blood rushing in his own ears. He did not ask anything else. There was no need. Those 2 words were enough. Vincent stood up slowly, every movement perfectly controlled. The other bosses fell silent and looked at him, and they saw something very few people live to tell about. Vincent's face did not change. There was no flash of rage, no shouting, no table smashed to pieces. There was only silence. The silence of a storm before it tears everything apart in its path. "I have to go," Vincent said, his voice so calm it was terrifying. The meeting was over. No one dared ask why. No one dared stop him. They had seen what happened to those who stood between Vincent Moretti and his daughter. Those people were now nothing more than names erased from history. Vincent walked out of the room. 3 bodyguards immediately followed. The private elevator carried him down to the garage in less than 30 seconds. The black Maybach was already waiting, its engine running. On the way to the hospital, Vincent called Marco back. His voice was still calm, but there was something in it that made Marco, a man who had killed with his bare hands, shiver. "Find out what happened. Find everyone involved. I want every detail before I get there." Marco swallowed. "Yes, boss." Vincent ended the call and looked out the car window where snow was still falling like tiny blades. His hand clenched on his thigh, his knuckles white with pressure. That was the only sign that the storm inside him was raging. People said that when Vincent Moretti was angry, he shouted. He smashed things. He ordered executions on the spot. But those were people who did not truly know him. Those who truly understood Vincent knew a far more frightening truth. When Vincent Moretti was silent, that was when he was most dangerous. The Maybach stopped in front of the emergency entrance of Northwestern Memorial Hospital, the finest hospital in Chicago, the one where Vincent's money had built an entire new wing 2 years earlier. He stepped out of the car before the driver could open the door, walking fast but never running, because Vincent Moretti never ran and never allowed anyone to see him panic. Marco was already waiting in the lobby, the face of the 45-year-old man tense in a way Vincent rarely saw. "Room 312, 3rd floor. Dr. Vasquez is inside." Vincent said nothing and stepped into the elevator. 30 seconds later, he stood before the hospital room door, and for the first time that night his hand trembled slightly as he pushed it open. Isabella lay on the hospital bed, small and fragile among the white sheets. Her lips were cracked and bruised. One cheek was swollen and red. Her hand was wrapped in a thermal bandage. But what made Vincent feel as if someone were squeezing his heart was his daughter's eyes. Eyes red from crying. Eyes that lit up when she saw her father enter. "Dad," Isabella whispered, and tears fell again. Dr. Vasquez, a 40-year-old woman with dark hair tied neatly back and the calm eyes of someone used to emergencies, stood up as Vincent came in. She had been the Moretti family's private physician for 10 years and was one of the few people Vincent trusted completely. "How is she?" Vincent asked, his voice still calm but his eyes never leaving his daughter. "Severe hypothermia. Cracked lips, bruised cheek from impact," Dr. Vasquez reported briefly. If she had arrived 30 minutes later, she might have lost her fingers. "But she will be fine. She is very lucky." Vincent sat down beside the bed, something he rarely did, and took his daughter's bandaged hand. "My love, tell me what happened." Isabella began to tell him, each word broken by tears, about Brandon Ashford, about the party, about how she refused him in front of everyone, about how he waited for her in the parking lot, dragged her into his car, drove her to an abandoned industrial area, about the insults, about being shoved into the snow, about the BMW driving away and leaving her alone in the night at -20 degrees. Vincent listened, his face without expression, but Marco standing by the door could see his boss's jaw clench so hard the muscle at his temple twitched. Then Isabella spoke about the woman. "Dad, someone saved me," Isabella said, her voice suddenly softer. She appeared out of the snowstorm. "She was so thin, Dad. Thin like she had not eaten in a month. And she was wearing an old coat, very old, patched everywhere. But she took it off and put it on me." Vincent said nothing, but something shifted in his eyes. "I told her not to. I told her she would freeze to death. But she did not listen. She even left her shoes for me, Dad." Isabella sobbed. "I saw her walk barefoot into the snow. Barefoot, Dad." Then she disappeared. I did not get to ask her name. Vincent looked to the side of the bed where a navy blue coat had been folded neatly. He picked it up, and for the first time that night something other than anger appeared on his face. The coat was heartbreakingly light. The fabric was worn thin. The left elbow was patched with plaid cloth. The right elbow was patched with floral fabric. The zipper was broken, replaced with mismatched old buttons. But the coat still held a faint trace of warmth, still carried a soft scent of lavender. Vincent understood at once. This was not just a coat. This was everything that woman owned, and she had given it away, to a stranger, in a snowstorm, knowing she might die. Vincent set the coat down, turned to Marco, and gave 2 orders. Find this woman. Find her at any cost. Find her before it is too late. Marco nodded. And the second order? Vincent stood, fastened the buttons of his suit jacket, and when he spoke, his voice was as cold as the storm outside. Brandon Ashford. Bring him to me. Marco left the hospital immediately after receiving Vincent's order, making non-stop phone calls as he walked to the car. Within 15 minutes, he had gathered 5 of his most trusted men. Those who had served the Moretti family for many years and knew how to work in the shadows without asking too many questions. 2 black SUVs cut through the snowstorm toward the abandoned industrial zone in the south of the city where Isabella had been found. The dashboard clock showed 2 in the morning. The outside temperature was minus 23 degrees and still falling. Marco knew they were racing against time, because if that woman had truly walked barefoot in this weather, she might already be dead. They reached the place where Isabella had been left, an empty lot among crumbling factories where even the homeless did not want to go. Snow was still falling thickly, covering everything and erasing all traces. Marco ordered the team to spread out, turn on their flashlights, and begin searching. The security cameras in the area had been broken for a long time. No footage had been recorded. There were no witnesses, no clues, only white snow and darkness. It was Marco who found the first trace. At the edge of the lot near a pile of rubble, there were footprints in the snow. 2 kinds of footprints. One was a small sneaker print, Isabella's. The other made Marco stop and look more closely. Bare footprints. The footprints of a woman, small and narrow, pressed deep into the snow. Marco crouched, shone his flashlight, and saw something that made even a man who had killed without hesitation feel a tightening in his throat. Bare footprints in snow at minus 23 degrees. No shoes, no socks, only naked skin against frozen ground, leading south. Marco stood, waved to the team, and they began to follow the trail. At first the prints were steady, purposeful, heading toward the distant old factory buildings. But the farther they went, the more the prints changed. The steps began to stagger. The distance between them grew shorter. Then Marco saw a large hollow in the snow where someone had fallen. Handprints. Knee prints. Then the footprints continued. The person had stood up and kept going. Fell a second time, stood again. Marco called for more men, split the team into 2 groups. One continued following the trail. The other drove around the roads to cover the area. He knew that every minute passing brought the woman closer to death. The footprints led them through a dark alley, through a scrapyard, through a vacant field full of weeds killed dry by the cold. Nearly 2 miles in a snowstorm, and the woman had walked barefoot. Marco could not imagine it. He had seen many things in his life, had witnessed brutal tortures, had carried out merciless executions with his own hands. But this quiet courage, this endurance without a single complaint, filled him with respect. Then the footprints began to change color. Red, blood. The woman's feet had begun to bleed, her skin cracking from the cold, and she kept going, did not stop. Finally, after nearly an hour of searching, the trail led to an old factory, a crumbling brick building with broken windows and a rusted metal roof. The prints went around the back, down a worn concrete staircase, and stopped in front of a heavy iron door leading into the basement. Marco signaled the team to stop, drew his gun, and slowly pushed the door. It opened with the creak of a rusted hinge, revealing a space as dark as ink inside. He turned on his flashlight, stepped in, and what he saw made him freeze. This was not an abandoned basement. This was a home where someone was living, and in the farthest corner of the basement, on a torn mattress, a figure lay motionless. Marco stepped into the basement, his flashlight sweeping through the dark space, and each detail revealed itself before him like a portrait of absolute poverty. The basement was about 20 square meters, its brick walls stained with patches of mold, its ceiling so low he had to duck in places. There was no electricity, no water, no warmth beyond what a human body could create on its own. In the left corner, a torn sleeping bag lay on flattened cardboard. Beside it, a few opened cans of food, a bottle of water frozen halfway, and an old backpack holding a few sets of clothes folded with a care that was almost painful to see. A rope was stretched across one corner with 2 shirts and a pair of faded jeans hanging from it. This was someone's home. This was where a human being had lived, had tried to survive, had fought with life one day at a time. Marco turned the flashlight toward the farthest corner where he had seen the figure, and his heart seemed to miss a beat. A woman lay curled on a thin mattress, her body drawn in on itself as if trying to keep the last trace of warmth. She wore only a thin sweater and jeans, soaked through from melting snow. Her bare feet were exposed, and Marco had to swallow hard when he saw them. The skin had turned a dark, purplish black, cracked and frozen, dried blood clinging to the wounds. He hurried forward, knelt, and turned her onto her back. Her face was pale like wax, her lips deep purple, her eyes tightly shut. Her cheekbones stood out sharply, her jawbone visible beneath fragile skin. This was the face of someone who had been starving for a long time, who had been fighting for a long time, and who was now losing. Marco placed 2 fingers on her neck to find a pulse. 1 second, 2 seconds. He held his breath. Then he felt it, faint, slow, like a small bird trying to beat its wings one last time before giving up. Alive, but not for long. Marco immediately took off his jacket and covered her, then pulled out his phone and called Vincent. His boss answered on the first ring. "Found her," Marco said, his voice rougher than usual. "But boss, she is dying. Where is she?" "In the basement of an abandoned factory on the south side." "Boss, she has been living here. There is nothing. No electricity, no water, no food. She gave your daughter everything she had." The other end was silent for a long moment. Marco could hear Vincent's breathing, steady but heavy. Then his boss's voice came, and Marco had to pull the phone slightly away from his ear to be sure he had heard correctly. "Bring her to my house. Call Dr. Vasquez immediately." Marco blinked. "Boss, what did you say?" "I said bring her to my house," Vincent repeated, his voice not wavering at all. "She saved my daughter's life by nearly giving up her own. She will not die in a cold hospital or on the street like a homeless person. Bring her here." Marco did not ask another question. In 20 years of following Vincent Moretti, he had learned that there were moments when no explanation was needed, only action. He bent down, gently slid his arms beneath the woman's back and knees, and lifted her. She was frighteningly light, as if her body were made of nothing but bones and will. Her head fell against Marco's chest, and he heard a weak whisper escape her cracked lips. "Lily." She called someone's name in her delirium, her frozen hand unconsciously clutching Marco's coat, as if clinging to life. Marco carried her out of the basement, up the stairs, and into the SUV, waiting with the heater running at full power. He did not know who this woman was, did not know her story, did not know who Lily was, but he knew one thing. Vincent Moretti never brought anyone into his home. Never had. And tonight, everything was changing. While Marco was bringing the unknown woman to Vincent's house, another team had completed the second task. Brandon Ashford was not hard to find. He was at a party in his friend's penthouse apartment in the Gold Coast area, where rich kids gathered to drink expensive liquor and brag about things they had never had to work to obtain. Brandon was sitting on a sofa, one hand holding a glass of whiskey, the other draped around a blonde girl, laughing loudly as he told his friends about his achievement. "You should have seen that girl's face," he slurred drunkenly. "Who did she think she was? A mafia boss's daughter or not? She dared to refuse me in front of everyone, so I taught her a lesson she will never forget." His friends burst into laughter, none of them knowing that the real lesson was coming, and that it would not be for Isabella. At 10 in the evening, the lights in the apartment suddenly went out. The laughter cut off, replaced by panicked screams and chaotic sounds of collision. When the lights came back on 30 seconds later, 10 men dressed in black were standing scattered around the room, faces cold as ice, guns in their hands. Brandon's friends shrank into the corners. The blonde girl screamed and cried, but none of the men in black even looked at them. All of them were looking at Brandon Ashford. One man stepped forward, his voice low and cold. "Come with us." Brandon tried to stay calm, tried to remember that his father was Senator Richard Ashford, one of the most powerful men in Illinois. "Do you know who I am? My father will." "Your father will do nothing," the man cut in. "And you have 10 seconds to walk out that door on your own, or we will drag you out. Your choice." Brandon did not get to choose. 2 men grabbed him, dragged him out of the apartment, shoved him into the elevator, then threw him into the back of a black SUV. He was blindfolded, his hands tied, and for the 30-minute drive he heard his own heartbeat pounding like a drum in his chest. When the blindfold was removed, Brandon saw that he was sitting on a metal chair in the middle of an abandoned warehouse, his wrists tied tightly to the sides of the chair. The warehouse was pitch dark, with only a single overhead bulb shining straight down on him like a circle of light in endless darkness. And in that darkness a man was standing. Brandon could not see his face, but he could feel his presence, cold, heavy, like death waiting. Then the man stepped into the light, and Brandon Ashford nearly lost control of his bladder. Vincent Moretti. He was not in a hurry, he did not shout, he did not threaten. He only stood there, looking at Brandon with steel-gray eyes as if they had been forged in the fires of hell. Silence. The silence stretched until Brandon could not bear it anymore. "Mr. Moretti, I am sorry. I did not know Isabella was your daughter. I only—" "You knew," Vincent cut in, his voice terrifyingly calm. "You knew exactly who my daughter was. You investigated before approaching her. You thought that if you could date my daughter, you would gain my protection." Brandon went pale. The lie died on his lips. "But my daughter refused you," Vincent continued, stepping closer. "She refused you in front of your friends, and you could not stand it. Your small, pitiful ego was hurt, so you decided to take revenge. You dragged my daughter into your car, drove her to a place where no one could hear her scream, and you left her there in a night of -20 degrees to die." Brandon cried, tears streaming down his face. "I am sorry. I am sorry. Please forgive me. Isabella provoked me. No one provoked you." Vincent was now standing directly in front of Brandon, looking down at him like at a worm. "My daughter said no, and you did not accept it, that is all. I will not kill you tonight, Brandon," Vincent said. "Your father is a senator, and I do not want political trouble, but you will remember tonight for the rest of your life." He nodded, and 2 men stepped forward, one holding electric clippers, the other a small knife. Brandon screamed as the clippers shaved away his golden hair, locks falling onto the cold concrete floor. He screamed as the blade carved letters into his chest, not deep enough to be dangerous but deep enough to leave permanent scars. 7 letters. COWARD. When they were done, Vincent took out his phone and photographed Brandon with his bald head and the bloody word on his chest. He sent the photo to Senator Ashford with a brief message. "Your son was spared because I respect your position. But if he speaks about tonight, if he comes near my daughter, or if I hear his name one more time, I will send him back to you in 10 different boxes." 20 minutes later, Brandon was released at the back gate of the Ashford estate, shaking in the snow, bareheaded, his chest bleeding, exactly the way he had left Isabella shaking in the snow a few hours earlier. The next morning, Senator Ashford announced that his son would be studying abroad in Europe for a few years. No one asked why. No one mentioned that night again, and Brandon Ashford, who once believed he could do anything without consequence, learned a lesson he would never forget. There are people whom, no matter who your father is and no matter how much money you have, you should never touch. Vincent Moretti is one of them. Nora Hayes opened her eyes and did not know where she was. Soft light from a large window filled the room, real light, not the dim light that filtered through cracks in the factory basement she had known for 8 months. She blinked, trying to adjust her vision, and the details of the room slowly appeared like a dream she did not dare believe was real. The room was 10 times larger than the place she had lived in. The walls were painted a pale cream, the ceiling high with delicate decorative moldings, a crystal chandelier hanging like frozen teardrops in the air. She was lying on a massive bed, the sheets soft as clouds, the feather duvet warm around her body, as if she were something precious that needed to be protected. Beside the bed stood an oak nightstand with a vase of fresh flowers and a glass of water on it. Everything was clean, expensive, and not part of her world. Panic came like a wave. Nora tried to sit up, but her body did not obey. Her head hurt like it was being struck with a hammer. Her limbs felt heavy as lead, and when she tried to move her toes, a sharp pain shot through her feet and made her grit her teeth. "Where am I?" she whispered, her voice hoarse from not being used. "Who brought me here?" The door opened and a woman entered, wearing a white doctor's coat, her dark hair tied neatly back. "She's awake," the woman said into a small communicator on her collar, then came to the bedside with a reassuring smile. "Miss Hayes, I am Dr. Vasquez. You are in a safe place. You have been asleep for 3 days. "Safe," Nora stammered. 3 days. No. I have to go to work. I have a night shift tonight. I have a sister who needs." She tried to sit up, but Dr. Vasquez gently placed a hand on her shoulder and kept her lying down. "Miss Hayes, you nearly died," Dr. Vasquez said, her voice serious but kind. "When we found you, your body temperature had dropped below the dangerous threshold. You had severe hypothermia and frostbite in both feet. You lost both of your smallest toes to necrosis. We could not save them." Nora looked down at her feet, wrapped in white bandages. She did not feel pain, perhaps because of the medication, or perhaps because she was already too used to loss to feel anything else. 2 toes, the price of saving a stranger, a price she would pay again without hesitation. "My sister," Nora whispered. "Lily? My sister. She is in foster care. She has a heart condition. She needs me." Dr. Vasquez had not yet answered when the door burst open and a young girl rushed in like a storm, Nora recognized her at once. The girl from the snowstorm, the girl she had given her coat to, the girl with cracked lips and frightened eyes. But now the girl looked different. Her cheeks had color, her lips had healed, and her eyes shone when she saw Nora. "She's awake, Dad," the girl cried, then rushed to the bed and wrapped her arms around Nora. "She's awake." Nora froze, not knowing how to react to a stranger holding her and crying as if she were the most beloved person in the world. The girl sobbed against Nora's shoulder, her body trembling, and between the sobs she whispered her thanks over and over. "Thank you. Thank you for saving me. You almost died because of me. Thank you." Nora awkwardly lifted her hand to comfort the girl, but her arm was still weak and shaking. She did not understand what was happening. She did not understand why she was here in this room, being cared for like someone important. She was only a homeless woman, a ghost the world had forgotten, someone with nothing but an old coat that she no longer even had. Then the air in the room changed. Nora could not explain the feeling, only that something had entered, something that made the room feel heavier, made it harder to breathe. She looked up toward the door. A man stood there, tall, cold, dressed in a black suit like the night, his dark hair slicked back, and gray eyes fixed on her. Those eyes were not as cold as she had imagined. They were burning with something Nora could not name. "He is your father, isn't he?" Nora asked the girl holding her, her voice a whisper. The girl looked up, nodded, and for the first time Nora saw her smile. "Yes, this is my father, Vincent Moretti." Vincent Moretti stepped into the room, and Nora felt as if all the air had been pulled out of it. He said nothing, only nodded to Dr. Vasquez, who immediately understood and left. Isabella also stood, squeezed Nora's hand once more, then stepped out and closed the door behind her. And then there were only two of them, Nora and the man she had never met but whom her survival instincts, sharpened over many years, told her was dangerous. More dangerous than anyone she had ever encountered. Dangerous in a way that the street predators she had learned to avoid could not compare to. Vincent pulled a chair to the side of the bed and sat down slowly, every movement perfectly controlled, as if he had all the time in the world. He was not in a hurry, not tense, and that made Nora even more uneasy. "You saved my daughter's life," Vincent said, his voice low and even. Not a question but a statement. Nora swallowed, trying to keep her voice steady. Anyone would have done that. No. Vincent looked straight into her eyes, and Nora felt as if he were reading every thought in her head. Not everyone would have done that. No one would take off their only coat in a night of -20 degrees to cover a stranger. No one would walk barefoot through snow for 5 miles, back to an abandoned basement without heat. No one would give away the only thing keeping them alive to save someone they had never met. Nora was silent. She did not know what to say. "Miss Hayes," Vincent continued, and the way he said her name made her flinch. "Or should I call you Nora, 27 years old. Mother died of cancer 13 years ago. Biological father left before she was born. Lived with stepfather Ray Hayes from 14 to 18, then disappeared from the system. Currently working 3 jobs. Washing dishes at night at Marcello's restaurant, cleaning offices early in the morning for Morrison Cleaning, and waiting tables during the day at Rosie's Diner, living in the basement of an abandoned factory on the south side for 8 months. And you have a sister named Lily Hayes, 12 years old, living in St. Mary's Orphanage, with a congenital heart condition that requires surgery within 3 months. Estimated cost $200,000. You currently have $12 in your pocket, and less than $2,000 in savings." Nora felt her blood turn to ice. "You investigated me?" she asked, her voice trembling with anger and fear. "You followed me. You know about Lily." "I know everything about anyone connected to my daughter," Vincent replied without apology. "That is how I protect what is mine." Nora clenched her teeth, trying to sit up despite the pain in her body. "I do not know what you want, but I have nothing to give. I already gave away the only thing I had." She pointed to the empty hook on the wall where her mother's coat should have hung. "I am not here to take anything from you," Vincent said. "I am here to offer a deal." Nora looked at him with suspicion. "What deal?" "I will pay the full cost of Lily's surgery," Vincent said calmly, as if he were speaking about the weather. "I will give you a clean, safe apartment with heat and hot water. I will give you a stable job with a salary enough to live comfortably, and I will use my connections to help you qualify to adopt Lily once she is well." Nora could not believe her ears. What Vincent had just said was everything she had dreamed of, prayed for, worked herself to exhaustion for years and still could not reach. And now a stranger was placing it all before her like a gift. "No one gives anything for free," she said, her voice hardening. "What do you want in return?" "You will work for me for 2 years," Vincent answered. "As my personal assistant, managing my schedule, arranging meetings, handling paperwork, ordinary office work. Nora looked at him, searching for the trap behind the offer. She knew who he was. She was not naive. Men who lived in mansions like this, men with private armies and private doctors, were not ordinary businessmen. "What do I really have to do?" she asked directly. "What do you actually want from me? Because I will not sell my body. I will not." "Miss Hayes," Vincent cut in, and something flashed in his eyes. Something like anger, but not at her. "I do not buy people. I do not force anyone to do anything they do not want to do. The work I am offering is legal. In my legal company, you will not have to touch anything illegal. That is my promise." Nora looked at him, trying to read him, trying to find a sign of deceit, but she found none, only cold honesty, and perhaps something she did not dare to name. She thought of Lily, of her sister's wide eyes, of her weak smile whenever Nora visited, of the way she held Nora's hand and said, "Do not worry, I will be fine," even though they both knew it was a lie. She thought of 3 months, 90 days, 2,160 hours left, before that small heart would stop forever without surgery. She thought of $200,000 she would never earn even if she worked herself to death. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why are you doing this? You do not know me. I am nobody." Vincent stood, walked to the window, and looked out at the falling snow. He was silent for a long moment before answering. "Because you did what I once did when I was young," he said quietly. "You gave away the only thing you had to save someone you did not know. Only when I did it, no one came to save me. No one gave me a second chance. I had to crawl out of hell on my own." He turned back to her and looked at her. "You deserve to have someone do that for you." Nora felt her eyes burn. She did not cry. She had forgotten how a long time ago, but something inside her chest was breaking open. 2 years, she said hoarsely. 2 years and Lily will have her surgery. Lily will have her surgery this week, Vincent replied. 2 years is for you to repay me in a way that lets you keep your dignity. I know you do not want charity. Neither do I. Nora looked at him, this strange man who could read her like an open book, who understood her in a way no one ever had. "All right," she said, and the word left her like a breath she had been holding for 13 years. "I agree." A month passed like a dream Nora still did not dare believe was real. The apartment Vincent arranged for her was in a building he owned, only a 10-minute walk from the Moretti Tower. It was not large, just 1 bedroom, a small living room and a kitchenette, but to Nora it was paradise. It had real walls, not crumbling bricks, real windows, with white curtains and morning sunlight. Hot water flowed from the tap whenever she wanted. There was a real bed with a soft mattress and warm blankets, not a torn sleeping bag on a concrete floor. On her first night in the apartment, Nora sat on the bed for 3 hours just to feel the softness of the sheets under her calloused fingers and cried without knowing why. Work began in the second week after her foot had healed enough for her to walk normally. Vincent's office occupied the top floor of the Moretti Tower, a vast space with glass walls overlooking all of Chicago. Nora's desk was in the outer room, directly in front of his private office door, the position of a gatekeeper. Her work was simpler than she had expected. Managing schedules, arranging meetings, answering phones, handling paperwork, ordering lunches, reminding him of appointments, the things any assistant did. There was nothing illegal, nothing frightening, nothing like what she had imagined when she thought about working for a man like Vincent Moretti. But Nora was not naive. She knew how to observe, how to listen, how to see the things others did not want her to see. By day, Vincent was the perfect chief executive of Moretti Holdings. He met with businessmen, signed real estate contracts, opened new restaurants, appeared in business magazines with a courteous smile. He wore expensive suits, luxury watches, and spoke with the tone of a well-educated and successful man. But at night it was different. At night other men came. They did not wear suits. They wore black leather and had the eyes of men who had seen death too many times to fear it. They entered Vincent's office through the back door. They spoke in whispers, and when they left, none of them looked at Nora, as if she did not exist, as if seeing her would be a mistake that needed to be corrected. Nora learned the first rule of this life quickly. Do not ask. Do not be curious. Do not look at what you should not look at. She arrived on time, did her work, and went home. She did not know what Vincent did in those late-night meetings, and she did not want to know. Curiosity killed the cat, and in this world it could kill much more than that. What surprised Nora most was not the darkness she glimpsed, but the light. Isabella came to the office almost every day after school, her backpack full of books, her smile bright as if she did not know who her father was in the underworld, or perhaps she did know and had learned to love him anyway. Isabella clung to Nora like a younger sister to an older one. She sat on the sofa in the waiting area doing homework and asked Nora about everything. About life, about books, about the future. She wanted to be a doctor, wanted to save people, wanted to do something good with her life. And Nora, who had had no one to talk to for many years, found herself helping Isabella review for biology exams, reading the girls' medical school scholarship essays, laughing at awkward stories about school. She did not realize she was smiling more until Isabella pointed it out. "You have a beautiful smile, Nora," Isabella said one afternoon. "You should smile more." Nora did not know what to answer, only felt something warm spreading in her chest, something she had forgotten a long time ago. She did not know that from inside the office, through the frosted glass, Vincent was watching. He watched his daughter laugh with Nora, watched the way Isabella leaned her head on the shoulder of the woman he had saved, watched the way the two of them looked as if they had known each other all their lives. Isabella was happy in a way Vincent had rarely seen since his wife left 15 years ago, and that happiness was because of Nora. One evening, after Isabella had gone home and Nora was tidying up paperwork to end the day, she looked up and caught Vincent watching her. He stood in the doorway of his office, holding a cup of coffee, his gray eyes not leaving her. Nora froze. There was something in that look, not the coldness she usually saw, not the calculation of a mafia boss, but something else, something softer, warmer, more dangerous. "Thank you," Vincent said quietly, for Isabella. Then he turned, stepped into his office, and closed the door. And Nora stood there with her heart beating faster than usual without knowing why. Lily's surgery day arrived on a Tuesday morning, 2 months after Nora began working for Vincent. Northwestern Memorial Hospital, the finest hospital in Chicago, where the best doctors in the country worked, and where the cost of one night was equal to a whole month of Nora's former salary. She sat in the surgical waiting room on a hard plastic chair, her hands clasped together so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Lily had been taken into the operating room 30 minutes earlier, the 12-year-old girl with wide eyes and a brave smile who had held her sister's hand and said, "Do not worry, I will be fine," before the door closed, and Nora could no longer see her. Now she could only wait, and pray to a God she was not even sure existed, because if he did, why had he allowed her and Lily's lives to be so full of suffering? Yet she still prayed because it was the only thing she could do. The waiting room was quiet in the early morning. Only a few other families scattered around, each lost in their own fear. Nora felt more alone than ever, alone in the way she had known for years, and yet that never hurt less. She had no one to hold her hand, no one to share the fear with, no one to tell her that everything would be all right. Then someone sat down beside her. Nora looked up, and her heart seemed to miss a beat. Vincent Moretti. He wore a gray suit, his hair neatly slicked back, looking as if he had just stepped out of an important meeting. And perhaps he had, because Vincent Moretti always had important meetings, always had million-dollar decisions to make, always had an empire to run, and yet he was here, in a hospital waiting room, at 7 in the morning. "You did not have to," Nora began, but Vincent cut in. "You should not wait alone," he said, as calmly as if the most powerful mafia boss in Chicago sitting in a hospital waiting room were the most normal thing in the world. And then he said nothing more. He just sat there beside her in silence. Nora did not know how to react. She turned back to the operating room door, and they sat like that, 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, time moving slowly as if trying to torture her. Vincent did not check his phone, did not handle work, did not leave. He just sat there, his presence like an anchor keeping Nora from being swept away by the storm of fear. Sometimes when Nora trembled too hard, he would place his hand on the back of the chair behind her, not touching her, but close enough for her to feel the warmth. 5 hours later, the operating room door opened, and a doctor in green surgical scrubs stepped out. Nora jumped to her feet, her legs shaking so badly she nearly fell. The doctor smiled, and Nora's heart finally loosened after hours of being crushed. "The surgery was a success," the doctor said. "Lily will need time to recover, but she will be healthy. Her heart will function normally. She will have a normal life," Nora cried. She did not want to cry, did not want to appear weak, but the tears came anyway, as if all the years she had held everything in were breaking open in a single moment. She cried from relief, from gratitude, because finally, Lily would be all right. Her sister would live, would grow up, would have a future. A white handkerchief appeared in front of her. Nora looked up and saw Vincent standing beside her, holding it, his face still cold but his eyes softer than usual. She took the handkerchief, whispered thank you, and tried to wipe her tears, though they kept falling. An hour later, when Lily woke up in the recovery room, Nora sat beside the bed holding her small hand. Vincent stood in the corner about to leave, but Lily saw him. "Sis," Lily whispered, her voice still weak from the anesthesia. "Who is he?" "He is very handsome." Nora nearly choked. She turned to look at Vincent, and for the first time she saw the cold mafia boss not know how to react, standing there awkwardly like a boy caught doing something embarrassing. And Nora laughed. She laughed for real. Not a polite smile or a forced one, but laughter from deep in her chest. A sound she had forgotten for a very long time. Vincent looked at her, at that smile, and something stirred in his chest. Something he had buried long ago. Something dangerous. Something he was no longer sure he was capable of feeling. 6 months passed like a beautiful dream Nora was still afraid she might wake from at any moment. Lily had fully recovered from the surgery. Her cheeks rosy, her eyes bright, running and laughing like any healthy 12-year-old child. She was still at St. Mary's foster home, but Nora visited every week, and with the help of the lawyer Vincent arranged, her adoption papers were being processed. Just a few more months, they told her. Just a few more months, and Lily would come home with her sister. Work at Moretti Holdings had become as natural as breathing. Nora knew Vincent's schedule to the minute, knew he liked his coffee black with no sugar, knew which meetings mattered and which could be postponed. She had found her rhythm, a peaceful rhythm she had never dared to imagine. But the past never truly releases anyone. It only waits, hiding in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. That morning began as normally as any other. Nora was at her desk arranging Vincent's meetings when noise rose from the lobby, shouting, arguing, the sound of a man's voice she had tried to forget for 9 years but recognized instantly. Her blood turned to ice. "I know the girl is here," the voice shouted. Closer now, louder. "Nora Hayes, my daughter, bring her out here now." Nora stood, her legs shaking so badly she had to grip the edge of the desk to keep from falling. She walked to the glass wall overlooking the lobby, and her heart clenched when she saw the man causing the disturbance. Ray Hayes, her stepfather. He was older than she remembered, more gray in his hair, heavier in his belly, but his eyes were the same. The eyes of a drunk, the eyes of a violent man, the eyes that had looked at her with greed and cruelty through 4 years of hell. He was shoving against 2 security guards, shouting without stopping. "That girl owes me. She owes me. I raised her for more than 10 years, and now she has to pay. I know she works for rich people here. Bring her out." Nora staggered back, her back hitting the wall. She could not breathe. The room spun around her. Memories she had buried came flooding back. Nights of beatings, days of hunger, the sound of a leather belt slicing the air, her own begging cries that no one heard, the smell of alcohol on his breath when he leaned close and told her she was useless. A burden, something that should never have been born. Security finally dragged Ray out of the building, but before the doors closed, he shouted, his voice echoing through the lobby. "I will come back, Nora. You hear me? You cannot hide. I will find you. You owe me. You will pay." Then he was gone, and the silence was worse than the shouting. Nora did not know how long she stood there, her back against the wall, her hands trembling uncontrollably. She tried to breathe, tried to calm herself, tried to remind herself she was safe, that he was gone, that this was not the old house and she was no longer a helpless 14-year-old child. But her body did not listen. Her body still remembered, still feared. "Nora!" Isabella's voice came from behind, and Nora flinched and turned. The 17-year-old girl stood there, eyes wide with worry, looking at Nora as if she were about to break apart. "Are you all right? You are so pale. What happened? Who was that man?" Nora opened her mouth to say, "I am fine," to lie the way she had lied all her life. But no sound came out. She only shook her head, tried to smile, but her lips trembled too much to form any shape. Isabella did not press her. She simply took Nora's hand, squeezed it gently, then turned away, and Nora knew where she was going. She wanted to stop her, wanted to say it was not necessary, that this was her problem and she could handle it herself, but she could not speak. 5 minutes later, Vincent's office door opened and he stepped out. His gaze swept the room and stopped on Nora, leaning against the wall, her face white as paper, her hands still shaking. He walked toward her and Nora saw his jaw tighten, his gray eyes darken in a way she had learned meant a storm was coming. "Who was that man?" Vincent asked, his voice low and even with something dangerous beneath it. Nora looked at him, then at the floor. She did not answer. She could not. Some things were buried too deep for too long, and digging them up would destroy her. Vincent did not force her. He only stood there, looking at her, and in his eyes was something Nora did not dare to name. "You do not have to speak if you are not ready," he said after a moment. "But Nora, you need to know one thing. Anyone who threatens what is mine will pay for it." Then he turned back to his office and closed the door. And that night, While Nora lay awake in her apartment, unable to sleep, Vincent Moretti sat in the darkness of his office with a phone to his ear. "Marco," his voice was cold as ice. "Investigate a man named Ray Hayes. I want everything. From the day he was born, to the day he walked into my building today. Everything." 2 days later, Marco placed a thick file on Vincent's desk. He said nothing, and only stood there, the face of the 45-year-old man tense in a way Vincent rarely saw. Vincent opened the file and began to read. Ray Hayes, 55 years old, former factory worker, fired because of alcoholism, married Sarah Hayes, Nora's mother. When Nora was 14, Sarah died of cancer 1 year later, leaving Nora alone with this man, and then hell began. Vincent turned each page, and with every page his eyes darkened a little more. School reports about bruises on Nora's arms and neck explained as falling down the stairs, hospital records of broken ribs, dislocated wrists, deep cuts that needed stitches, neighbors' statements about screaming at night, about a thin child who was never allowed outside. 4 years, from 14 to 18, 4 years of beatings, hunger, and being treated like a slave in her own home. But that was not the worst. Vincent turned the next page, and his body went rigid. When Nora was 18, Ray Hayes sold her to a trafficking ring, sold her like a commodity in exchange for $10,000 to pay gambling debts. Nora was locked in a container for 3 days with 12 other girls waiting to be transported to Mexico. She cut her own restraints with a piece of sharp metal, broke the lock with her bare hands, ran into the night with bleeding hands and scars that would follow her all her life. The scars on her wrists Vincent had seen. The scars he had thought were self-inflicted, but they were not. They were marks of a fight for survival, of an 18-year-old girl saving herself when no one else did. Vincent closed the file, his hand clenched on the desk, knuckles white, his jaw grinding so hard the muscle at his temple twitched. But he said nothing, did not slam the desk, did not shout, only silence, the most frightening silence Marco had ever witnessed. "Boss," Marco said carefully, "do you want me to handle it?" Vincent stood, took off his jacket, folded it neatly over the back of the chair, rolled up his shirt sleeves to the elbows, revealing strong arms with raised veins. "No," he said with terrifying calm. "I will do this myself." Ray Hayes was not hard to find. He was drunk in a cheap bar on the south side, boasting to other drunks about the deal he was about to get from his ungrateful daughter. "She works for rich men now." He laughed, drool on his chin. "She owes me. I raised her for years, and now she has to pay." He did not know a black SUV was parked outside, did not know 3 men in black were waiting for him, and certainly did not know Vincent Moretti was standing in the dark alley behind waiting. When Ray staggered out at 11 at night, he was dragged into the alley before he could understand what was happening. Slammed into the brick wall, his back hit hard, and when he looked up, he saw a man standing before him, tall, cold, eyes gray like steel forged in hellfire. "Who are you?" Ray stammered, struggling as 2 men held his shoulders. "What do you want?" Vincent did not answer. He only stepped forward and punched, the first blow into the stomach, folding Ray over as he vomited alcohol and bile. "This is for the 4 years she was beaten in your house," Vincent said calmly, the second blow to the face breaking Ray's nose with blood spraying. "This is for the nights she was starved, the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th. Each blow a crime Ray Hayes committed. Each blow a scar on Nora's body. Each blow a night she woke screaming. This is for selling her like an object," Vincent said as Ray's jaw broke with a dry crack. "You sold your daughter to traffickers for $10,000. $10,000. That is the price you put on a human life," Ray cried and begged, blood and tears mixing on his swollen face. "I am sorry. Please forgive me. I will never look for her again, I swear." "You will never look for her again," Vincent said, grabbing Ray's hair and forcing him to look up. "Because you will disappear. You will be taken very far away, and you will never return to Chicago. If I hear your name again, if you try to contact Nora or Lily, if you even think about going near them, I will not beat you. I will kill you, and I will make it slow." He let Ray drop to the ground like a sack of trash. "Take him away," Vincent ordered. "Send him to Alaska. Put him to work in a mine. I do not want to see his face again." Ray Hayes was dragged away, his pleas fading into the night, and Vincent stood there in the dark alley looking down at his hands, bruised, bleeding, aching, but not as much as what Nora had endured, not even a fraction. That night when Vincent returned to the estate, he found Nora standing in the first-floor hallway. She had not gone back to her apartment. She was waiting for him. Nora looked at Vincent. At his bruised hands he did not bother to hide, and she understood. She did not need to ask. She already knew. "What did you do to Ray?" she whispered. Vincent looked at her. gray eyes still echoing with the storm. "What should have been done a long time ago," he said, then walked past her toward his study, and Nora stood there watching his back, tears running down her face that she did not wipe away. Nora did not return to her apartment that night. She went up to the highest balcony of the estate, a place she had discovered by accident a few weeks earlier when she got lost in the vast building. The balcony overlooked all of Chicago at night, the lights flickering like a million stars fallen onto the earth. She stood there, hands gripping the railing, and cried, not loud sobs but the quiet tears that slid down the cheeks of someone who had forgotten how to cry and now could not stop. She cried for Ray Hayes, for the 4 years of hell she thought she had buried but that still followed her every night in nightmares. She cried for 13 years of loneliness, for nights of hunger in a frozen basement, for the times she wondered if anyone would notice if she disappeared from the world. But most of all she cried because for the first time in her life someone had protected her. Someone had seen her scars and instead of turning away had stood in front of her like a shield. She did not know how to handle that feeling. She had relied on herself for too long, built her walls too high, and now someone was breaking them down brick by brick, and she could not stop it. She did not hear footsteps behind her, did not know how long Vincent had been standing there watching her cry in the dark. She only knew when his voice came, low and gentle as if afraid to startle her. "You do not have to be strong all the time." Nora turned and through her tears saw Vincent a few steps away, his bruised hands roughly bandaged. He looked different in the darkness, less cold, less frightening. Just a man trying to comfort someone and not knowing how. "No one ever," Nora tried to say but her voice caught. "No one ever did that for me, protected me, stood on my side. I am used to taking care of myself. I thought that was the only way." "You were used to it because you had no other choice," Vincent said, stepping one pace closer. "But now you do." Silence. The night wind blew cold but neither of them moved. Nora looked at Vincent, and in his gray eyes, she saw something she had never seen in anyone when they looked at her. Not pity, not contempt, but understanding, recognition, as if he saw her, truly saw her. Not a homeless girl, not a victim of violence, but a human being who had fought to survive and was still standing. "I do not know how to receive," Nora whispered. "I only know how to give." "I know," Vincent replied. "I am the same." And then Nora really cried. Not quiet tears but sobs from deep in her chest, the crying of a child who had held it in too long and was finally allowed to let go. She did not know whether she stepped forward or Vincent did, only that a moment later she was crying into his chest, her forehead against his shoulder, and he stood there stiffly as if unsure what to do. A few seconds passed, then she felt a hand on her back, awkward, hesitant, as if he had forgotten how to touch someone without causing pain. Then a second hand rested on her shoulder, and Vincent held her. Not the embrace of a man practiced in comforting others, but of someone learning how again, one movement at a time. They stood like that for a long while, the night wind blowing, the city lights flickering below. Two people used to loneliness learning how not to be lonely. When Nora finally lifted her head, eyes red, cheeks wet, she looked into Vincent's eyes and saw something she had never seen there before. Gentleness, buried beneath the ice, hidden behind the cold gray gaze. A heart that still knew how to beat. "Thank you," she whispered. Vincent said nothing. He only raised his hand, brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb, then let go and stepped back. "You should rest," he said, his voice calm again though something had changed. "Tomorrow will be better." Then he turned and walked into the darkness, leaving Nora alone on the balcony with a heart beating to a rhythm she no longer recognized. The next 3 months flowed like a gentle river, and Nora did not realize she was changing until it was too late to turn back. It began with small things. So small she told herself she was imagining them, reading too much meaning into accidental gestures, like the way a cup of hot tea would appear on her desk every night when she worked late without a word from anyone. She never saw Vincent set it down. She would only look up and it was there, steaming softly, as if it had materialized out of nothing. Like the way evening meetings suddenly lasted longer than usual, and Vincent would ask her to stay to discuss work, and then they would sit across from each other in his office with expensive Italian takeout he had ordered, talking about things that had nothing to do with work. Like the way he found excuses to drive her home even though she could easily walk the 10 minutes, saying the streets were dark and unsafe even though they both knew no one would dare touch someone belonging to Vincent Moretti. Nora tried to push those thoughts away. He was her boss, a mafia leader, a man who lived in a world completely different from hers. He was only repaying a debt, only keeping a promise, only doing what a man with principles would do, nothing more. There could not be anything more. But her heart would not listen to reason. It beat faster whenever Vincent entered the room. It skipped whenever he said her name. It softened a little more each time she accidentally caught moments when he did not know anyone was watching. Like the afternoon she went to the hospital to see Lily and found Vincent already there, sitting beside her sister's bed reading a fairy tale in a warm voice she had never heard him use with anyone. Lily giggled and said Uncle Vincent read better than Sister Nora, and Vincent looked at the girl with such tenderness Nora had to turn away for fear she would cry. Like the time she went with Vincent to a meeting with business partners, and one of them said something insulting, calling her a little secretary in a condescending tone. Vincent said nothing in the meeting, but the next week that man's company went bankrupt and no one ever looked at Nora with disrespect again. Like the night she woke from a nightmare in her apartment, opened the door to get water, and saw Vincent standing in the hallway as if he knew she needed someone nearby. He said nothing, only stood there until she calmed down, then nodded and left. Isabella was the first to say aloud what Nora was trying to deny. "Do you like my father?" Isabella asked one afternoon as they sat in the office, her voice as innocent as if she were asking about the weather. Nora nearly spilled her tea. "What? Do not say that." Isabella laughed, her eyes bright with the mischief of 17. "You are blushing. And so is he. He has never looked at anyone the way he looks at you. Never. Not even my mother." Nora did not know what to say. She only shook her head and tried to focus on her computer screen, but her ears burned and her heart raced. It was not only Isabella who noticed. Marco, the quietest man Nora had ever met, also began to look at her differently. Once she accidentally overheard him speaking to Vincent in the office, his voice unusually hesitant. "Boss, you are—" "Be quiet, Marco," Vincent cut in, his voice sharp but not angry. And then that night came. They were sitting in the office reviewing papers to be signed. It was late and the city had fallen asleep. Nora handed a file to Vincent and their fingers touched. Just a light accidental brush, but neither of them pulled away. They sat there with their fingers still touching on the papers, and Nora looked up into gray eyes holding something she did not dare name. Time seemed to stop. Then Vincent was the one to pull back first, stand up, and go to the window with his back to her. "You should go home and rest," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "It is late." Nora nodded even though he did not see, gathered her things and left. But all that night she could not sleep. All that night she still felt the warmth of his fingers on her skin. In the underworld, news traveled faster than light, and word that Vincent Moretti, the coldest boss in Chicago, the man believed to have no weakness except his daughter, now had a woman at his side, spread as far as New York within weeks. The Kozlov family had been watching Vincent for months. They were one of the largest mafia organizations on the East Coast, controlling much of the underground activity from New York to Boston. And now they wanted to expand into the Midwest. Chicago was the target, and Vincent Moretti was the only obstacle. Victor Kozlov, the head of the family, was a 60-year-old man with eyes as cold as ice and a heart even colder. He had built his empire on the bones of his enemies, and he did not mind adding a few more bodies to the collection. But he was also smart enough to know that a direct attack on Vincent Moretti would be suicide, so he looked for another way, a weakness, and he found one. The photographs were placed on Victor's desk one spring morning. Nora Hayes stepping out of the Moretti Tower with sunlight on her brown hair and a soft smile on her lips. Nora Hayes sitting in a car with Vincent talking about something that made her laugh. Nora Hayes at the hospital visiting a girl the file identified as her sister. Nora Hayes walking back to her apartment alone in the evening without bodyguards. "Who is she?" Victor asked, the man standing before him. "Nora Hayes, 27 years old, has been working as Moretti's assistant for nearly a year," the man replied. "And according to our sources, Moretti treats her very differently from other employees. He personally dealt with her stepfather a few months ago, paid for her sister's heart surgery, and moved her into property he owns." "Different how?" Victor asked, his eyes lighting up. "As if she matters to him," the man said. "Matters in a way no one except his daughter has ever mattered." Victor smiled, the smile of a fox who had found the door to the henhouse. "Keep watching," he ordered. "Learn everything about her, her schedule, her habits, her weaknesses, and keep it quiet. It is not time to act yet." But Victor underestimated Vincent Moretti's information network. Only 2 weeks later, Marco placed another set of photographs on Vincent's desk, covert shots of strange men watching Nora. "Boss," Marco said tensely, "someone is watching Miss Hayes, Kozlov's people." Vincent studied the photos and Marco saw his jaw tighten. "How long have they been watching her?" "At least 2 weeks that we know of," Marco answered. "Maybe longer. They are professionals. They know how to stay hidden. If it were not for a source inside Kozlov, we might not even know." Vincent was silent for a long moment, looking at pictures of Nora smiling, walking, living her life unaware that someone was stalking her in the shadows. "Increase her protection," Vincent ordered. 2 men, 24/7. But keep distance. I do not want her to know. She will worry. Yes, boss. Marco nodded. And Kozlov? Not yet. Vincent stood and went to the window looking out at the city. We wait, see what they want. They will not attack directly. They are looking for leverage. We will not give them the chance. Kozlov's message came 3 days later. A black envelope delivered to Vincent's office with a handwritten note inside. We want half of Chicago, the Northern Territory, the transport routes, and 20% of the casino revenue. In return, we will leave alone what you value most. If not, we will take it. There was no signature, but both sides knew who it was from. Vincent burned the letter, watched the flames consume each word, then called his most trusted associates. War was coming, and he needed to prepare. In the days that followed, Nora sensed something was wrong. Vincent was more tense than usual. There were more secret meetings, more dangerous men coming and going. He often stared out the window with distant eyes, and sometimes she caught him looking at her with a gaze she could not read. What is wrong? Nora asked one evening when they were working late. You seem worried these days. Vincent looked at her, and for a moment she saw something in his eyes. Fear. No, not fear for himself, but for someone else. It is nothing, he said calmly, though she knew he was lying. Just business. You should stay inside for the next few days. Do not go anywhere alone. Nora wanted to ask more, but Vincent's eyes told her this was not the time. She nodded, not knowing that outside in the darkness eyes were still following her every step. Nora tried to listen to Vincent. She truly did, but when Lily called with her voice breaking, saying, Sister, I miss you. I want to see you. Today is Mom's anniversary, and I do not want to be alone. Nora could not refuse. It was the day of their mother's death. The day every year Nora lit a candle by her grave, even when all she had was a wild flower picked from the roadside. And Lily, now 13 and living in foster care, needed her sister with her on that day. Nora told herself it would be quick, just a few hours, visit Lily, light the candle, then go straight back. Vincent would not know. She would be safe. She was wrong. She left the apartment at 2 in the afternoon, while Vincent was in an important meeting and no one noticed. Took a taxi to St. Mary's. Spent 3 hours with Lily lighting a candle and talking about their mother, and when she left at 5, the sky was already darkening. She walked toward the main road to catch a taxi home, and that was when everything collapsed. A black SUV pulled up hard beside her. The door flew open, and before Nora could react, 2 men grabbed her, dragged her inside, pressed a cloth soaked with anesthetic over her mouth, and the world blurred and went black. When she woke, she was sitting on a metal chair with her wrists tied tight to the sides and her legs bound to the legs of the chair, in an abandoned warehouse with stained brick walls and the smell of damp and rust. A single bulb overhead shining down on her like a circle of interrogation light in endless darkness. She was not alone. 3 men stood around her with guns and cold faces, and opposite her on an elegant chair that did not belong in this place sat an old man with silver hair and eyes like a snake's. You are awake, he said with a faint Russian accent. Good. I hate waiting. Who are you? Nora asked more calmly than she expected. She had been in worse places before, locked in a container waiting to die. Compared to that, this was just another bad day. Viktor Kozlov, the man replied with a polite smile, as if at a cocktail party. And you are Nora Hayes, the woman who makes Vincent Moretti weak. I do not know what you are talking about, Nora said. I am only his assistant, nothing more. Victor laughed softly, a laugh that never reached his eyes. You lie very badly, Miss Hayes, but that is all right. We will soon know the truth. He nodded, and one of the men stepped forward and punched Nora in the face. She tasted blood, her head swam, but she did not cry, did not beg. She had endured worse with Ray Hayes. She had learned how to become stone, how to retreat inside and wait for the storm to pass. Half an hour later, with her face swollen and blood at the corner of her mouth, Victor took out his phone and called, putting it on speaker so Nora could hear. Vincent answered on the second ring. Hello, Mr. Moretti, Victor said sweetly, like honey mixed with poison. I have something that belongs to you. Silence on the other end. A woman, Victor continued. Brown hair, brown eyes, a few scars on her wrists. She is quite stubborn, I must say. Not very cooperative. Nora heard Vincent's breathing change. Heavier, slower, like someone holding back a volcano. What do you want? Vincent said, and Nora had never heard his voice like that. Not cold, but glacial. Cold enough to freeze hell itself. Half of Chicago, Victor replied. The Northern Territory, the transport routes, 20% of the casino revenue, 1 woman for half a city. Fair, yes, Silence. Then Vincent spoke slowly and clearly. If you touch a single hair on her head, I will kill you. I will kill your entire family. I will erase the Kozlov bloodline from the earth, and I will make it slow. Victor laughed. You have 24 hours. After that, I will send her back to you in pieces. The call ended. Victor stood and looked at Nora with interest. He really cares about you. I was right. Nora said nothing, only stared at him with empty eyes. She had learned long ago how to hide fear. At Moretti Tower, Marco stood frozen. In 20 years, he had never seen this. Vincent stood in the middle of the office with his desk overturned. Papers everywhere, the laptop shattered on the floor, his hand bleeding from broken glass, but he did not notice. His eyes burned like hellfire, and when he roared, the entire floor fell silent. Find her, he shouted. Mobilize everyone. Call every contact. Find where the Kozlov are holding her now. Boss, we need to stay calm and plan. Now, Marco. Vincent cut in, and something in his voice made Marco step back. And when you find them, I want everyone who touched her dead. All of them. Marco nodded and turned to give orders, but before leaving he looked back at Vincent standing in the wreckage of himself, and a thought crossed his mind. He loves her. Truly loves her. Not concern. Not gratitude. Love. 15 minutes later, when a source reported Nora's location, Vincent already had a gun and was heading out. Boss, wait for the team, Marco said. It is a trap, you cannot go alone. Vincent did not turn back. She is there alone, he said. She is waiting for me. And then he disappeared into the night, and Marco could only run after him, praying they were not too late. Nora had lost all sense of time. She did not know how long she had been in that warehouse, only that her face was swollen and aching, her lips were cracked and bleeding, and her body had gone numb from sitting too long on the cold metal chair. Victor had left after his call with Vincent, leaving 3 men to guard her. They did not speak to her. They only stood there like stone statues with cold eyes and hands, never leaving their guns. Nora forced her mind to stay awake. She thought of Lily, of her sister's smile blowing out birthday candles months earlier, of her promise to bring her home. She thought of Isabella, the 17-year-old girl who treated her like a sister and had hugged her and thanked her for saving her. She thought of Vincent, of the gray eyes that looked at her with a tenderness he tried to hide, of the awkward hand on her back the night she cried, of the cups of hot tea that appeared on her desk every late night. If she died here, at least Lily had her surgery. At least her sister would live, and be healthy, and have a future. That was what mattered most. Victor returned after a few hours, and he was not alone. 5 more armed men with the eyes of killers. Moretti is not responding, Victor said with irritation. It seems he needs more motivation. He nodded to one of the men, and Nora knew what was coming. She clenched her teeth and prepared for pain, but it never came. Instead, the lights went out, and darkness swallowed everything in an instant. There were shouts and gunshots and bodies hitting concrete and sounds of violence exploding around her. Nora could not see, only hear. Then the lights came back, and she saw hell. Men lay scattered on the floor, some unmoving, some groaning in their own blood, and standing among them like an angel of death was Vincent Moretti, his black suit stained, hair fallen over his forehead, gun smoking in his hand, gray eyes burning with something wild and primal she had never seen before. He looked like a monster from a nightmare, and the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. You came alone, Victor screamed in panic. Vincent did not answer, and only walked forward slowly, saying he did not want anyone to steal his right to kill them. Victor fired, and Nora cried out when Vincent staggered, clutching his shoulder bleeding, but he did not fall or stop. He kept coming until he reached Victor, disarmed him and struck him again and again, until Marco and his team pulled him back. Vincent stopped breathing hard with blood on his hands. Then he turned and saw Nora, still tied, bruised but staring at him, as if for the first time. He knelt and cut her free with shaking hands warm against her wrists. She whispered that he had been shot and needed a hospital, but he cut her off, asking if she was hurt. She said only a few punches and she was fine, but he was not. He said he was fine and then collapsed forward, resting his forehead on her shoulder. Nora froze, then wrapped her arms around him, feeling his hot breath on her neck. "Never do that again," he whispered. "Never disappear like that again. I thought I lost you. I thought I was too late." Tears ran down her face, and she held him tighter, saying she was here. She was still here, and he held her as if he would never let go, his blood soaking into her clothes, neither of them noticing, only knowing they were alive. They were together, and that was enough. Nora woke in the familiar hospital room, soft light through the window telling her it was daytime, though she did not know which day. Her body ached, her face felt tight from bruises, but she was alive. She was still here, and she was not alone. Vincent sat in the chair beside her bed, with his head bowed and eyes closed, his right shoulder heavily bandaged, his arm in a sling, his face gaunt with stubble and dark circles under his closed eyes as if he had not slept for days. He looked like hell and he looked like home. Nora shifted slightly and the small sound was enough to wake him. Gray eyes opened, and when they met hers, something lit in them. Relief, gratitude, and something deeper she did not dare name. "You are awake," Vincent said hoarsely. "You slept for 2 days." 2 days. Nora tried to sit up but had to lie back. "How long have you been here?" The door opened, and Marco came in with a coffee, and stopped when he saw Nora awake. "Miss Hayes, are you all right?" he asked, then looked at Vincent with a look. Nora did not understand. "The boss has been here since you were brought in. 2 days. Would not leave." Nora looked at Vincent and he looked away as if caught doing something embarrassing. "Go outside, Marco," Vincent said, not as an order but almost a request. "Let us talk." Marco nodded, set the coffee down, and left, closing the door. Silence fell. Vincent stood and went to the window with his back to her. "You almost died because of me," he said heavily. "They took you because of me. They hurt you because of me. If I had been later, if I had not found you, I almost died because madmen kidnapped me," Nora cut in firmly. "Not because of you. You did not make me go there. You did not cause this. And you came. You saved me." Vincent turned, and in his gray eyes Nora saw something she had never seen before. Fear, not of enemies or death, but of losing something important. "Are you not afraid of me?" he asked quietly. "After all you saw, I kill people, Nora. I beat men unconscious. I do things you should never have to know. Can you still look me in the eye after what you saw in that warehouse?" Nora looked at him, the man between light and shadow who burned the world to bring her back. "You protected me," she said. "You protected Lily. You protected Isabella. What should I be afraid of? I have seen what real monsters look like, Mr. Moretti. You are not one of them." Vincent came closer and sat beside her, his fingers trembling as they touched her cheek where the bruise was fading. "I do not know how to love someone," he whispered, like confessing a sin. "I do not know how not to hurt the people I care about. I have lived in the dark too long, Nora. I do not know if I can step into the light." Nora placed her hand over his and held it there, feeling the warmth and the tremble. "Then we learn together," she said. "I do not know how to receive love either. I do not know how to trust anyone, but maybe we can teach each other." Vincent looked at her, and something in his eyes broke like a dam finally giving way. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull back if she wished, but she did not. She lifted her head, and their lips met. The first kiss, light as breath, gentle as if she were the most precious thing he had ever touched. No urgency, no demand, only two broken people, learning how to heal together. When they parted with their foreheads touching, Nora opened her eyes and saw him looking at her as if she were the world. As if she were the reason he kept living. Neither of them knew that outside the door, Isabella was standing there watching through the small window. She smiled the brightest smile she had ever had and quietly walked away down the hall with a heart full of joy. Her father had finally found happiness, and Nora, the woman who saved her in the snowstorm, would become family. 6 months later, on an autumn afternoon when golden leaves covered the streets of Chicago, Nora Hayes officially became Lily Hayes's legal guardian. She stood in the courthouse holding her sister's hand tightly, and when the judge struck the gavel and declared the petition approved, she had to bite her lip to keep from crying in front of everyone. Lily could not hold it in like she could. The 13-year-old burst into tears, threw her arms around her sister, and whispered that she was going home now, that she was really going home. And this time it was not a lie but the truth. Lily left St. Mary's that very day with a small suitcase containing everything she owned and a heart full of hope. Nora's apartment now had a second small bedroom decorated in the pale purple Lily loved, with a soft bed, a study desk, and a bookshelf full of stories Isabella had chosen as housewarming gifts. Lily's first evening in her new home was dinner at Vincent's estate. Not a grand formal event, but just the four of them around a small dining table Vincent almost never used. Vincent at the head, Nora beside him, Isabella and Lily across from each other. The food prepared by a private chef, but the atmosphere warm and intimate, like any ordinary family meal. Lily and Isabella became sisters almost instantly, laughing, sharing secrets, planning movie nights, shopping trips, sleepovers. Isabella saying she had always wanted a younger sister and Lily saying she had always wanted an older one, and the two of them hugging as if they had waited their whole lives for this. Vincent watched in silence, and Nora knew he was thinking what she was thinking, that this was family. Not blood, not biology, but people who chose each other, found each other in snowstorms and darkness, and decided they belonged together. When dinner ended and Isabella took Lily to see her room, Vincent took Nora's hand and led her into the living room, saying there was something he wanted to show her, and Nora's eyes stopped on what hung on the wall opposite the fireplace. The coat. Her mother's navy wool coat, with its mismatched patches on the elbows and uneven buttons where the broken zipper had been. The fabric worn thin by years. The coat she had given away in a snowstorm to save a stranger. The coat that had changed everything, now framed in glass like a work of art, like a priceless treasure. Beneath it a small brass plaque engraved with the words, "The coat that changed everything." Nora stood there unable to speak, tears running down her cheeks without being wiped away, asking in a whisper why he had done this, and Vincent beside her looked at the old coat with reverence and said it was where everything began, and he wanted to see it every day, to remember that there were still people willing to give everything for a stranger, and that she had saved his daughter with the only thing she had, and that because of that coat he had found her. Nora leaned her head against his shoulder and stood there with him, watching her mother's old coat shine like a beacon in the elegant room. That night when Lily was asleep in her new bed, and Isabella had gone to her room, Vincent and Nora stood on the balcony looking over the city, and Vincent said quietly that the 2 years were over, and their agreement was complete, and she was free. Nora saw the worry he tried to hide, his fear that she would leave, and she took his hand, threaded her fingers through his, and told him she knew but she did not want to go, that this was her home, and he was her home. And Vincent looked at her, and for the first time Nora saw the coldest mafia boss in Chicago smile like a child who had just been given a gift he never dared hope for. 2 years later, on a winter night, when snow once again began to fall over the city of Chicago, Vincent brought Nora back to where everything had begun. The abandoned industrial district of the past had been completely transformed, the crumbling factories torn down and replaced by a modern building with large letters across the front reading the Hayes Center, where no one is left behind, a community center Vincent had built on the land he purchased to provide food, shelter, and work opportunities for people who had once lived as Nora had lived, and he had named it after her family without telling her until that night. "Why did you bring me here?" Nora asked, eyes wide as she looked at the brightly lit building in the winter darkness. "Because this is where I found you," Vincent said, taking her hand and leading her to the exact spot where 4 years earlier she had given away her coat to save a stranger. "This is where you proved that even in the darkest night there is still light, that even when you have nothing you can still give, that kindness needs no reason." And then he knelt, and Nora stopped breathing, snow falling around them like white petals, just like that winter night 4 years before, but with everything changed. Vincent opened a black velvet box, revealing a diamond ring shining under the lights, and said her name with a tremor she had never heard in his voice, that she had saved his daughter with everything she had saved him without knowing it, had taught him that he could still love and trust and be better, that he did not deserve her with his bloody hands and dark past. But she had chosen to stay, and chosen him, and now he was asking if she would choose him for the rest of her life and become his wife. Nora cried and nodded, unable to speak, and when he slid the ring onto her finger she pulled him up and kissed him beneath the falling snow, in the place where 4 years earlier she had been only a lonely ghost, and now she had the whole world. Their wedding took place the following spring in a small church outside Chicago, not because Vincent lacked the money for a grand celebration, but because Nora wanted something warm and intimate, with only those who truly mattered. Isabella was the maid of honor in a pale pink dress, crying through the ceremony with happiness. Lily was the flower girl at 17, healthy and radiant. Marco stood beside Vincent as best man, and for the first time in 20 years truly smiled. And when Nora walked down the aisle in her simple white gown, Vincent looked at her as if seeing her for the first time, as if she were a miracle he had never dared believe was real. Their vows were simple but bone deep in sincerity, as Vincent promised to protect her, love her, and never let her feel as alone as she had been the day he found her. And Nora promised to love both his light and his darkness, and remind him every day that he deserved love. 10 years later, the estate was no longer cold or empty, but filled with the laughter of a 5-year-old boy named Daniel, after Nora's mother Daniela, with his father's black hair and his mother's warm brown eyes, and the light of the family. Nora, at 37, was no longer the homeless girl she once was, but the director of the Hayes Foundation, the largest charity in Chicago for abused children and the homeless, turning her pain into strength and her past into a bridge for others. Vincent, at 46, had shifted most of his business into legal channels, stepped back and left the rest to Marco, still feared in the underworld but also a father reading bedtime stories and a husband making coffee each morning. A man who learned that true strength is not how much you can destroy, but how much you can protect. Isabella, at 27, had become a doctor as she dreamed, working in a children's hospital and saving lives every day, married to a human rights lawyer and expecting her first child. Lily at 22 was in medical school following Isabella's path. Her heart fully healthy, and her life a testament to second chances. And one afternoon when the family was together, Daniel pointed at the old coat in its glass frame and asked why they kept an old coat on the wall. Vincent looked at Nora, and she smiled and nodded, and he lifted Daniel onto his lap and said that coat changed everything. Because his mother had given it away to save Isabella when she was in danger and had nothing else to give but still gave it. And because she gave it, he found her. And because he found her, they had this family. Daniel looked at the coat with wide eyes and said his mother was brave and a hero. And Nora smiled with stinging eyes and a warm heart and said she was not a hero, only someone who learned that when you give with a sincere heart, the universe finds a way to return it 100-fold. And the coat still hung there with a new line added beneath it, reading, "From nothing to everything, from nobody to family." And Nora Hayes Moretti, who once slept in an abandoned basement with $12 in her pocket, looked around at the room, full of laughter, at her husband holding their son, at her daughters debating a movie, and for the first time in her life she was not afraid that happiness would be taken from her, because she understood that happiness is not something you find, but something you build, one brick at a time, with love and sacrifice and faith that, no matter how many times life knocks you down, you can still rise and choose to live with meaning. And the story ends with a reminder that unconditional kindness has value beyond measure, that resilience can rewrite even the most painful past, that family is not blood but those who choose you and stand beside you, and that even in the deepest darkness there is light waiting for those brave enough to seek it. And with gratitude for listening and an invitation to share, reflect, and carry that kindness forward, the story wishes every listener health, peace, and the knowledge that you deserve love, and that even a small act of kindness can change a life. And it ends with a gentle farewell until the next story.